Above the quiet, seemingly ordinary waters of the Pacific in 1944, a fleet of Japanese planes slipped through the early morning mist, engines barely audible over the lapping waves. Each aircraft a carefully concealed weapon of destruction. Their pilots trained not only in the arts of navigation and aerial combat, but in the clandestine, morally ambiguous doctrine of missions, so secretive that their very existence was denied to all but a handful of high-ranking officers, and as they ascended through layers of cloud that glowed faintly with the rising sun, the tension in the cockpit was palpable, every gauge, lever, and dial carrying the weight of lives, reputations. In the course of a war that had already consumed millions, while below, unsuspecting islands, naval bases, and shipping routes lay oblivious to the approaching shadow. The crews of the Japanese planes moving with a deadly combination of precision and urgency, knowing that a single mistake could mean exposure, capture, or death. And the secrecy of the mission added an almost supernatural pressure. For even if the planes returned, the information they carried, the outcomes they influenced, would be classified, buried in archives with the explicit purpose of erasing proof of their actions, creating a paradox in which survival and success meant erasure of personal heroism and history itself. And as the lead pilot adjusted his course, the sun reflected off instruments and metal surfaces in blinding streaks, while each man in formation felt the invisible weight of command, conscience, and commitment pressing on him. The psychological strain amplified by the knowledge that the enemy could be anywhere, radar stations, patrolling aircraft, or hidden coastal guns, and that detection would ignite a chain reaction of violence and retaliation that could extend far beyond the Pacific horizon. And as the fleet approached its target, the clouds thickened, obscuring islands and coastline in opaque walls of vapor that shifted constantly with the wind, forming both cover and hazard. And within the cabins, the pilots' hands moved instinctively, flipping switches, scanning dials, reading coded messages, their minds balancing risk, reward, and the moral complexity of executing a mission so secret that its consequences, if discovered, could alter not only the war effort but also the historical record. And as minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the first hint of enemy reconnaissance appeared, a faint glint on the water below, and the formation tightened instantly. Instruments checked, communications whispered, evasive maneuvers ready, and every heart in the fleet skipped a beat, each man aware that discovery would lead not just to failure, but to an obliteration of all they had trained for, their lives suspended in a razor-edged balance between triumph and annihilation. While above, the clouds swirled like smoke over an unseen battlefield, the ocean glittering with deceptive calm, and every passing second ratcheted the suspense higher, the combination of secrecy, danger, and unknown enemy action, creating a pressure cooker of tension that would draw any viewer into the cockpit, forcing them to experience the mission as if they were flying alongside the pilots, feeling every twitch of the throttle, every decision point, every moral dilemma, every heartbeat synchronized with the rise and fall of engines, the distant echo of anti-aircraft artillery in other theaters, in the shadow of classified operations, looming over the minds of men trained to carry secrets that history might never acknowledge. And as the fleet penetrated deeper into enemy-controlled waters, the anticipation of action, the fear of exposure, and the claustrophobic weight of responsibility combined to create a narrative suspense so thick, so visceral, that the viewer is immediately hooked in the first minute, compelled to continue, feeling the tension, danger, and secrecy pressing from every direction. As the secret mission of Japan during World War II unfolded in full cinematic detail, blending technical precision, human fear, strategic genius, and the harrowing consequences of a mission so classified that it remains a mystery even decades later. And as the point closes, the scene hangs in limbo, the viewer's curiosity stretched taut, eager to follow the fleet deeper into the unknown, and the suspense becomes almost unbearable, ensuring that they remain glued to the story, every second charged with the tension, danger, and unspoken truths of a secret operation that history itself tried to erase. Asterisk. As the Japanese fleet continued its stealthy approach across the Pacific, the tension in every cockpit escalated, the horizon stretching endlessly. A deceptive expanse of blue water and shifting clouds that hid the lethal precision of enemy patrols and coastal defenses. And within each plane, pilots were hyper-aware that any misstep could mean not just their deaths, but the compromise of an operation so secret that even the highest-ranking officials of the Empire had barely acknowledged its existence. And every instrument flicker, every subtle vibration, every whisper through the radio became a heartbeat in the symphony of impending danger. While below the waves, hidden submarines tracked the movements of the fleet. Sensors scanning, sonar pulsing, and the faint echo of distant ships' propellers added to the psychological pressure. A constant reminder that discovery could trigger a maelstrom of attacks from sea, sky, or hidden artillery, and as the lead pilot adjusted altitude to remain cloaked under cloud cover, sunlight pierced through in jagged beams, illuminating the silver fuselage in a way that made the planes glint like deadly predators, the reflection masking their true numbers while amplifying the sense of exposure. And inside, each crew member calculated fuel, engine performance, and oxygen supply, while simultaneously running through the mental algorithms of enemy detection, potential interceptions, and rapid emergency procedures. Each calculation, a lifeline to survival in a theater where a fraction of a second could tip the balance between life and death. And as they neared their objective, the soundscape of the mission transformed into an almost tactile sensation of tension, the low hum of engines, the faint creak of metal under strain, the whisper of wind across wings, and the distant, unidentifiable rumbles of other aircraft moving in unknown patterns below, all blending into a symphony of suspense that gripped not only the pilots, but anyone who dared witness it. The audience imagining the claustrophobic cockpit, the adrenaline-laden focus, the moral weight of a mission so secret that success meant silence and failure meant obliteration. And as the fleet descended closer to the target islands, the cloud cover thickened, forming opaque walls of gray and white that twisted with the wind, each pilot threading through them with near-superhuman precision, relying on both instinct and meticulously trained calculation, aware that a single misjudgment could expose them to enemy fire, yet daring to move forward because the mission's objective, the intelligence they carried, and the strategic consequences were too critical to abandon. And in this moment, the viewer can feel the physical strain on the men, the tension in their muscles, the sweat and frost forming simultaneously on their skin, the psychological weight of bearing secrets that could alter history, the almost invisible pressure of knowing that no reinforcements could come, no backup existed, and the only path to survival was flawless execution under impossible circumstances. And as the first glint of enemy radar reflection appeared, subtle, almost imperceptible, the formation executed a series of evasive maneuvers, honed through countless hours of training, banking sharply, climbing aggressively, descending into cloud banks to disappear. Every movement a calculation of survival, and as flares ignited in the distance, tracer lines arced through the sky like deadly threads. The pilot's hands moved with surgical precision, every throttle adjustment, rudder twist, an aileron flick synchronized to avoid detection, while the psychological tension coiled tighter with every second, and the audience is forced to experience not just the technical complexity of flight, not just the physical danger, but the deep, almost unbearable suspense of a mission that exists in the shadows of history, one that the world may never officially acknowledge, yet whose impact rippled through strategies, battles, and decisions far beyond the Pacific horizon. And as the fleet threaded closer to the target, the clouds shifted suddenly, revealing glimpses of enemy ships, anti-aircraft guns camouflaged against rocky shorelines, and radar towers scanning for intruders all at once. A deadly puzzle in which the pilots were pieces moving with perfect alignment, yet each second brought new uncertainty, new possibility of failure, new risk of exposure, and every heartbeat became a drum of suspense, tension, and cinematic terror, fully immersing the viewer in the cockpit, making them feel the relentless pressure, the near-impossible precision, the moral weight, and the raw fear that defined the secret mission, while simultaneously building the hook that ensures no one watching could turn away. Compelled to follow every second of the fleet's journey into the unknown, into danger, into history that remained classified even decades later. A story of courage, secrecy, and suspense that wraps the viewer tightly in its narrative, drawing them through clouds, radar shadows, and enemy-infested waters with tension so palpable that every mile feels like a life-or-death gamble. And as the point closes, the audience is left on the edge of their seat, knowing that the fleet is inches away from ultimate exposure, from catastrophic failure, from secrets revealed, and from a climax that will shake everything they thought they knew about. World War II's hidden operations. Asterisk as the Japanese fleet pushed deeper into enemy-controlled waters. The sense of imminent discovery became almost tangible, hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Every pilot aware that the slightest deviation from course, the faintest sound, the tiniest glint of metal reflecting sunlight, could alert enemy radar operators or patrolling aircraft to their presence. And inside the cockpits, tension fused with adrenaline, the men's eyes darting constantly from horizon to instrument panel, scanning for anomalies, tracking the faintest ripples on the ocean below that might indicate the presence of enemy destroyers, submarines, or reconnaissance planes, while the radio remained ominously silent. The usual chatter replaced with the suffocating weight of secrecy, silence that pressed down on them more heavily than any flak burst or machine gun fire could. And the knowledge that this mission had been classified at the highest levels made the stakes all the more unbearable. For survival would not guarantee recognition, and failure could erase lives, careers, and even historical memory itself. And as the formation approached a narrow channel of islands where intelligence suggested enemy activity was concentrated, the clouds thickened, weaving into grotesque shapes, twisting like phantom fingers, and every pilot instinctively adjusted altitude and angle, threading their aircraft through the shifting gray walls with near superhuman precision, trusting, training, instinct, and luck in equal measure. While below, the ocean shimmered deceptively, reflecting the changing sky, masking hidden threats, and creating the sensation that the very sea itself was complicit in hiding dangers that could end the mission in an instant. And as the lead pilot navigated the formation through the most perilous stretch, the first faint outline of enemy radar installations emerged, camouflaged against rocky cliffs, almost invisible, yet instantly recognizable to trained eyes. And with this discovery, the mental pressure intensified. Each decision, a delicate negotiation between risk and reward, between secrecy and exposure, and the audience feels every moment of it. The swirling clouds outside echoing the swirling chaos inside the pilots' minds. While every instrument flicker, every throttle adjustment, every twitch of a control surface becomes a lifeline, a measure of survival, and a point of suspense so extreme that the tension is almost unbearable. And as they descended lower to avoid radar detection, the ocean below transformed into a treacherous maze of coral reefs, jagged rocks, and hidden shoals, the danger not just from enemy fire, but from the very environment itself. And the pilots were forced to calculate constantly, balancing altitude, speed, and formation tightness, while the psychological strain gnawed at them, the weight of secrecy pressing as heavily as the air above them, and the slightest misstep could trigger detection, interception, or death, while every second stretched longer. The hours feeling like days, the landscape below an endless tableau of risk. And as distant searchlights cut through the cloud cover, the fleet executed maneuvers that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. Each turn, dive, and climb, choreographed with breathtaking precision, yet under constant threat of discovery, while the narrative tension builds for the viewer, immersing them in the cockpit, forcing them to feel the strain of hands-on controls, the cold sweat on brows, the accelerating heartbeat with every shadow and every glint in the sky. And as enemy ships finally loomed into view, camouflaged, silent, and deadly, the pilots held their breath, executing evasive maneuvers, banking sharply, cutting engines briefly to avoid detection, the silence punctuated only by the roar of wind and engines, while the knowledge that history would never officially acknowledge the mission added an almost existential weight to every decision. And the audience is pulled into this claustrophobic tension, experiencing the peril of every meter traversed, the constant threat of annihilation, the unbroken suspense that drives the story forward. As the fleet threads closer to its objective, knowing that every second matters, that every shadow may conceal detection, that every decision could mean success, failure, or death. And as the point closes, the tension hangs like a storm over the ocean, the secret mission of Japan in the Pacific pressing forward into the unknown, leaving the viewer desperate to follow every next move, fully hooked by the danger, the secrecy, and the cinematic, almost unbearable suspense that has been built minute by minute, second by second, inch by inch. The story plunges further into the heart of the enemy's territory, to the shadows that history may never fully reveal, compelling the audience to stay glued to the screen for every pulse-pounding second of this extraordinary, classified mission. As the fleet pressed deeper into enemy-controlled skies, the tension reached a nearly unbearable peak, the air thick with anticipation. The clouds above swirling like molten silver, reflecting the rising sun in jagged streaks, while below, the vast expanse of the Pacific seemed deceptively calm, hiding the deadly reality of hidden patrols, radar stations, and armed ships waiting to detect the slightest anomaly. And inside each cockpit, the pilot's hands moved almost automatically, trained muscles responding to instincts honed over years of preparation, their eyes flicking constantly between instruments, horizon, and distant shadows in the clouds. Aware that detection at this moment would mean total failure, mission compromise, or death, and as the lead pilot signaled subtle adjustments in formation, the fleet executed near-impossible maneuvers with mathematical precision, banking, climbing, and diving to thread through gaps in the cloud cover, the roar of engines and the wind outside forming a symphony of tension, fear, and deadly focus, while the mental pressure inside each pilot escalated, the knowledge that they carried secrets so critical that history itself had attempted to erase them, pressing down with suffocating weight. And as the islands of enemy observation came into range, camouflaged and deadly, the fleet seemed to move as a single organism. Each plane, a limb, in a living, breathing entity dedicated to secrecy, speed, and survival, while below the glint of radar reflectors and searchlights began to outline the danger, revealing just how thin the margin for error had become. Every second a razor-edge negotiation between detection and evasion, life and death. And the audience is pulled into this cockpit, experiencing the psychological, physical, and technical, the intensity of the mission, as if they themselves are strapped into the seat, feeling every vibration of the aircraft, every twitch of control surfaces, every heartbeat synced with the pulse of danger all around. And as the lead pilot plotted a path through the most perilous stretch, lightning suddenly flashed in the distance, illuminating camouflaged anti-aircraft emplacements, distant patrol ships, and clouds that seemed to shift menacingly, every shadow a potential threat, every beam of light a harbinger of discovery. The pilots had to adjust instantly, banking sharply, diving, climbing, throttling up and down with a precision that bordered on superhuman. The engines screaming against the thin, high-altitude air, while inside, fear, adrenaline, and relentless focus intertwined in a perfect storm of human endurance. And as the minutes dragged on, the first signs of mechanical strain appeared. Instruments flickering under electrical load, controls stiffening in the cold, metal groaning under stress. Yet the pilots pressed onward, knowing that turning back was not an option, that the secrets they carried, the orders they executed, and the outcomes of this mission were far too critical to allow hesitation. And as enemy reconnaissance aircraft finally emerged from the clouds, silent and menacing, the fleet executed evasive maneuvers so intricate that they seemed choreographed by fate itself, twisting, rolling, and diving with a precision that defied gravity. While tracers from distant anti-aircraft fire cut jagged lines through the sky, illuminating the dangerous path below, each flash a reminder that discovery would mean obliteration, and the psychological suspense built to almost unbearable levels. every pilot balancing fear, instinct, calculation, and survival, every second feeling like minutes, every mile traveled a gamble against detection, mechanical failure, and death. And for the viewer, the sensation is visceral, immediate, and relentless. As they are drawn fully into the cockpit, witnessing the heart-stopping tension, the artistry of evasive flight, the pressure of secrecy, and the cinematic scope of a mission so classified that even decades later, official records remain sparse, incomplete, and deliberately obscured. And as the point closes, the fleet hovers on the precipice of history, teetering between discovery and successful completion, the audience caught in a vice of suspense and fascination, compelled to continue watching, glued to the story of human courage, precision, and the near-impossible orchestration of a secret Japanese mission that the world may never fully understand, leaving them on the edge of their seat, craving the next revelation, the next twist, the next moment of cinematic terror and suspense. Asterisk as the fleet of Japanese aircraft inched ever closer to the heart of the enemy's most fortified positions. The tension inside each cockpit became almost unbearable, a suffocating weight that pressed against the pilots' chests with every breath, every heartbeat. Every minor adjustment to the controls amplified by the awareness that the very survival of their mission, and perhaps the fate of entire campaigns, rested on their ability to navigate through a gauntlet of hidden dangers. And the clouds above twisted like living, malevolent entities, forming ghostly corridors of fog and mist that alternately concealed and revealed the deadly reality below, while below the surface of the calm, seemingly infinite Pacific, enemy patrols moved silently, sonar echoing in the deep, mines hidden along shipping lanes, reconnaissance aircraft on unpredictable patrols, and the invisible gaze of radar installations scanning for the slightest deviation in the waves or air. And inside the pilots' minds were a mixture of calculation, fear, and intense focus, each man running complex mental algorithms to anticipate threats, manage fuel consumption, monitor instruments, coordinate with other planes, and stay undetected. The cacophony of engines, wind, and mechanical hum blending into a tense symphony of suspense. And the psychological pressure was as tangible as the clouds and winds buffeting the fuselage. For each pilot knew that a single miscalculation, a delayed maneuver, a misread instrument could spell instant detection and annihilation, while every passing second intensified the suspense. The audience, drawn into a visceral experience of human courage, pushed to its absolute limit. And as the lead pilot adjusted formation to avoid a sudden glare from the sun reflecting off a distant radar tower, the fleet executed a sequence of evasive maneuvers that were as elegant as they were life-saving. Banking, diving, climbing, and weaving with a precision that seemed superhuman, yet fraught with mortal danger, and every movement was dictated by a combination of instinct, rigorous training, and split-second calculation. The weight of secrecy, responsibility, an imminent threat coiling tightly in each pilot's chest like a living entity. While outside, the clouds thinned and thickened unpredictably, sometimes revealing patches of shimmering water that hinted at enemy ships, coastal fortifications, or hidden airstrips. Each a deadly trap in waiting, and the fleet moved with a combination of audacity and fear, threading through nature and enemy alike, while the audience is forced to feel every pulse of adrenaline, every tremor of the aircraft, every fraction of a second in which fate could tilt violently toward death, and the mental strain was compounded by mechanical anomalies appearing at the worst possible times. Instruments flickering under electrical load, engines overheating in the thin air, controls stiffening in the cold altitude conditions, alarms occasionally screaming while the pilots adjusted, improvised, and pushed forward, knowing that turning back was not an option. And as the fleet approached the narrowest and most dangerous passage of the mission, the psychological and physical tension converged into a near-tangible force. Every man simultaneously a master of engineering, a mathematician, a tactician, and a human being balancing fear, hope, and the unrelenting weight of secrecy, while enemy radar, patrolling aircraft, and hidden artillery could reveal them at any second. and the suspense for the viewer reaches a near crisis point, immersive and relentless, as every passing moment carries the potential for annihilation. Every maneuver, a negotiation with life and death. Every second loaded with consequences that history may never fully record. And as the point closes, the fleet hovers in a moment suspended between success and exposure. Every heartbeat and every breath synchronized with the pulse of danger around them. The viewer gripped by the cinematic intensity, suspense, and extraordinary skill of the pilots, compelled to continue watching, eager for the final revelations, the climactic maneuvers, and the shocking outcomes that define a mission so secret that even decades later, its full story remains partially hidden, yet its tension, terror, and cinematic impact resonate with unmatched power as the fleet of Japanese aircraft reached the culmination of its perilous journey. The psychological tension inside every cockpit had reached a nearly unbearable peak, the men's hearts pounding in unison with the roar of engines. Their minds a razor-edged mixture of calculation, instinct, fear, and unyielding focus. Each pilot acutely aware that one false move, one misread instrument, one unnoticed glint of sunlight reflecting off enemy radar or patrol ships could instantly transform the culmination of weeks, months, and years of planning into catastrophic failure and death. While outside, the clouds roiled and twisted like living entities, forming both barriers and deceptive gaps, their ever-shifting forms concealing anti-aircraft guns, patrolling fighters, and hidden coastal defenses that could strike without warning. And the ocean below, shimmering deceptively in the fragmented light, hid mines, enemy submarines, and vigilant ships lying in wait, creating a labyrinth of danger that combined with the air threats to form an almost claustrophobic theater of peril. And inside, every pilot's hands moved with mechanical precision born of training, experience, and the adrenaline-fueled need to survive. Adjusting throttle, rudder, ailerons, and instruments in a choreography of life-and-death calculation, while simultaneously monitoring fuel, engine performance, and the subtle anomalies that might signal mechanical failure, a threat as lethal as any enemy aircraft. And as the fleet descended into the final stretch of the mission, every shadow, every glint, every flicker of radar or instrument became a trigger for immediate action, a potential catalyst for disaster. Each man balancing the imperative of secrecy with the imperative of survival. The knowledge that the mission itself was so classified that history might never fully acknowledge, it pressing on them as heavily as the physical strain of the flight, while above the clouds opened in jagged corridors, revealing glimpses of enemy defenses. Searchlights slicing through mist, tracer rounds streaking across the sky in deadly geometries, and distant patrol aircraft moving silently yet menacingly. And every movement of the fleet was synchronized, yet perilously close to catastrophe. Each evasive maneuver a delicate dance on the razor edge of fate. The pilots threading through invisible barriers with near superhuman precision, their eyes flicking constantly between instruments, horizon, and threats, their minds calculating probabilities, risks, and contingencies at speeds that defy comprehension. While the audience is immersed fully in this relentless suspense, feeling the tension, fear, and exhilaration as if strapped into the cockpit themselves, sensing the mechanical stress, the aerodynamic pressures, and the psychological strain of carrying secrets so vital that failure would erase the mission, lives, and historical memories simultaneously. And as the fleet passed the most dangerous enemy positions, clouds swirling like smoke over the battlefield, anti-aircraft fire tearing arcs of light across the sky, the pilots executed final maneuvers that required not only skill and courage, but imagination, improvisation, and an almost supernatural calm under pressure. Each decision potentially the difference between survival and annihilation. While mechanical alarms screamed intermittently, instruments flickered under strain, and the wind howled across wings and fuselage. The audience swept along in this hurricane of suspense, unable to look away, hearts racing with each twist, turn, and evasive dive, and as the final minutes of the mission unfolded, the fleet emerged from the gauntlet into open skies, exhaustion, relief, and adrenaline coursing through every body. The full enormity of the journey settling in the fleet had survived the impossible, executed the unthinkable, and carried secrets that the world may never fully acknowledge. While the viewers remain hooked, experiencing every heartbeat, every moment of terror, every split-second decision, as though they themselves had flown through clouds. Fire and shadow alongside these men, and as the aircraft reached the final leg toward safe territory, distant islands silhouetted against the dawn hinted at safety. The ocean's surface catching the first rays of sunlight, and yet the suspense remained taut, for history had not yet recorded every detail. The danger had not completely dissipated. The secret mission's ramifications stretched far beyond the immediate survival of the pilots, affecting intelligence, strategy, and global outcomes. And in these final seconds, as the fleet glided toward land, every viewer is left in rapt attention, fully immersed, sensing the final tension. The last pulse-pounding threat, the culmination of weeks of secrecy, months of planning, and years of preparation, and as the last instruments flicker and the engines roar toward their destination, the audience experiences the full sweep of heroism, suspense, and historical intrigue, compelled to remain engaged until the very end. Understanding not only the physical and psychological endurance required, but also the monumental secrecy, audacity, and near-impossible precision that define this mission, leaving a lasting imprint of cinematic tension, suspense, and awe. A finale that grips the viewer completely and ensures that the story, from first heartbeat to last, has been experienced as an unbroken, immersive journey into the heart of one of World War II's most secretive, dangerous, and extraordinary operations.